Oh, there it is.
All right, there it is.
All right. Hello, everybody. This is Steven Simmons with The Deadline. Today I am speaking with,
Terry Shaka.
and I just want to get into a little bit of a profile today. So we're going to get to learn a bit more about this wonderful woman that I have in front of me today. So, for my first question is going to be, where are you from, Miss Terry?
I'm from Rochester. You ever meet anybody from Rochester? Hardly ever, right?
I know it's really weird because it seems like everybody is either from here or from somewhere far away.
Far away? No, not far away. I've lived in other places. I lived in Buffalo, New York during the Black Arts Movement, the Black Power Movement. I then moved to Los Angeles, and then I came back to Rochester.
That's what's up. It's always good to hear about folks traveling and coming back home to bring some of that experience.
Hmm.
Always warms my heart. I hope to do the same one day. Now, I got a little bit of background information from Mr. Carson, and I want to thank him for that. So, shouts out to you, Mr. Carson. He told me that you have been running the Baobab Central Cultural Center for more than 10 years.
Um, I wasn't the director for 10 years, maybe for 6 or 7.
Mm,
But I was there for maybe about 12 years
okay.
in some capacity, but most of it was volunteering.
So, what is it like there? What do you guys do?
Well, I mean, the center was set up to actually teach African culture, and so that we could see how we're connected,
Mm.
how we're connected throughout the diaspora. And it was an art gallery and a museum of sorts, and also a place where people could take tours. And sorry, I'm on my front porch, so you can hear
Okay.
the traffic go by.
You can hear from the
Um,
room, so they go by loud. It's all
yes,
right.
I just knew that was going to happen as soon as we got started. So, um, but it was a place for people to gather and also to have special events. So, special events, art shows, special art projects, and educational tours.
That's excellent. That's really cool. And I'm saying it wrong. So could you tell me how to pronounce it so I don't continue to?
Baobab, so it'd be like the bough of a tree. The
Mm.
baobab is a tree, and it was a tree where traditionally people would meet in Africa under this tree
Oh,
to discuss important issues.
yeah. All
Okay.
right. So you heard it here first. Go check out the Baobab Cultural Center, man. It's
Well,
got a lot of.
I'm not sure what's going on there now.
Mm.
I'm not there. So I'm not sure moving forward because of COVID-19. So I actually don't know what the future is for that.
But if it ever does reopen, and when the world opens back up again, if you're seeing this in a post-COVID world, I want to bless your heart because it was really tough getting through it, and I want to inspire you to go check out the Baobab Center if you're out here watching this after COVID's all done, because I want to go personally, and you might just see me there. So,
Okay.
all right, now I've also was told that you studied it while you were in Buffalo for a while, like you have an art degree. Tell me a little bit about that.
About what art? I'm sorry,
Yeah.
could you broke up a little.
Oh, I apologize. So I was told that you have a degree in the arts. So I wanted to ask a bit about that. Like not only what like specific art you have a degree in, but
So it was
what
visual arts. It was actually art education, which I didn't have any interest in, but I was told that was the only thing I could do with it, which was not true. So, but I'm a painter, an illustrator, and haven't done any of that for a while. So this has given me an opportunity, this kind of time to kind of get back into it. But the arts in general is extremely important. So having come through the Black Arts movement,
Mhm.
um, that encompasses not only visual art, but performing art, theater, literature, all of those things, um, which is so important in any type of progressive movement, because what people don't realize is it's the artists that actually show you how to move through a cultural movement. They bring the culture to you, and that sets a standard for how to act and how to view things.
Now, you've mentioned this Black art movement a few times, and I
Mhm.
personally don't know much about it, and I don't think some of our viewers do. Some of them may, but I'm not sure on how many do. So, could you tell us a bit about what it was like during that time?
Well, this was during the anywhere from the mid 60s to the mid 70s. And it really kind of corresponded or almost followed the civil rights movement. And so um, those people who write history don't see it as an actual movement, but it was, because it was linked with the Black Power movement. So along with that, you always had images. Most people can remember, for example, the Black Panther Party um, had an artist named Emery that did all of their images. And so people from back in the day might have posters um, with some of the artwork of Emery. So, but then also during this time, you could see that musicians, particularly jazz musicians, John Coltrane was big then. Um, in terms of poetry, was Amiri Baraka, the Last Poets, Gil Scott Heron. There are a lot of people that you may have heard of. If you haven't, you need to look them up,
Definitely.
because they preceded what we know as the spoken word. Nikki Giovanni, most people know, of course, Sonia Sanchez, Hakeem Matabuti, who was then Don L. Lee. So there were a lot of people writing and a lot of people doing music. But what was different about this movement is that everything was decided by Black people. And so the arts movement, the visual art, was done in a manner that only we would do. You know, so it wasn't copying somebody else's art, but it was done in the colors that we like. So we weren't doing pastels like the Impressionist painters. We were using what we call Kool-Aid colors, or bubble gum. So they were, they were really, really bright, and we were doing it in a manner that we wanted to do it in. The music was produced the way we wanted to produce it. And so John Coltrane and some of the very progressive jazz musicians were doing music that they felt nobody else could play, because they relied on their instinctive rhythms and their instincts in music, which is a lot like traditional African drumming. You can get 4 or 5 drummers together, and they're not playing the same rhythm, but it all goes together. We can do that, okay? It's like we can also remix, if you will, okay?
Yeah.
So we can take somebody's song and we can turn it into something else, like our own version. And
Like
that
the
was
funny,
what musicians were doing then. Hmm.
yeah, because they'd take like disco or rock records, and they'd find one part, and they'd bring it to that, and they play it over and
Yeah.
over again, make something new.
And disco, that's real interesting, because that was a whole other era,
Mm.
you know, which followed a war, and then that was very that was destroyed, and that's a whole other thing. But even hip hop follows. So what happened was that the disco records were taken, and they were remixed into hip hop. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah,
So, but but the artists were very, very key
yeah.
during this movement. Hmm.
What do you feel about some of the artists of today? Do you think that some of them embody the spirit of that once great Black arts movement into the
Oh,
modern day?
absolutely. There are definitely new artists. You know, there's an Afrofuturistic movement. There is there are some other artists that we probably don't even know the names of. For example, I was looking at as I'm looking at this famous piece now of George Floyd. You know, who's the artist? No one has talked about the artist. Okay, the artist is a Latin artist that is from Belize.
Mhm.
You know, so we don't know this, and nobody's talking about him. You know, but it would do us some good to try and really catch on and learn who these artists are, who's doing background music to things. You know, and we've got more action on the street. So you can tell I live in the hood, right?
Yeah, but that's how I know you be keeping it real.
It's home. You know,
Yeah.
I've been all kinds of places, but this is home. So now, were you going to ask me about Dr. Karenga? Was that one of the things that we were supposed to talk about?
Actually, no, but now, wait, no, let me backtrack that statement because that
Mm-hmm.
might actually be something that I'm supposed to be talking about. I took some notes here, so I'm just gonna scroll through them right quick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I apologize, and sorry for those watching if I seem kind of frantic. This is still kind of new at this, but yeah, I really like to know more on your thoughts about this man and the things that they did.
During that time, you're saying?
Yeah.
So, but Dr. Karenga specifically, you know, he is actually one of our great living scholars
Mm.
today.
Oh.
And he doesn't always get credit for it, but he is one of our, he and Dr. Malefi Asante are our principal scholars of today. I mean, I hear, you know, a lot of young people talking about other folks that they think are scholars, but they are not at the level of Dr. Karenga or Dr. Asante, either one.
Mm.
I have the pleasure of knowing both of them. Um, Malefi Asante was in Buffalo when I lived in Buffalo. So we were acquaintances then. He spoke at my wedding. Um, and then Dr. Karenga, I met in 1978, so shortly after I got married, because I married one of his one of his founders, one of his original participants in US organization.
Mm.
And people don't know about US organization because they know about the Black Panther Party, and that's it. So we have to be mindful that that we pull the history that we need to know,
Mm.
because what we tend to do is pick up the history that's been laid out there for us and what's been promoted. And the Black Panther Party and US organization were started at the same time, along with SNCC, which is the Student Non-Violating Coordinating Committee. So there were different factions going on. So there was a political thing going on that came. A lot of it came through the churches, like very progressive Christian churches. And
Interesting.
so that's where you get people that like Stokely Carmichael was his name at the time, and Brother Jamal, who was known as H. Rap Brown. So they came through the SNCC program, and then you had SCLC. So there were a lot of things that people are probably familiar with during that civil rights movement. But at the same time, there was, and this was in California, was the Black Panther Party, and people know them. You know, Eldridge Cleaver, and
Yeah.
you know. But anyway, Assata Shakur, a lot of people that were connected with the Black Panther Party, Bobby Seale, Huey Newton. But at the same time, the US organization was formed, and that was Dr. Karenga's organization. Now, Dr. Karenga is, as I said, is a scholar. He was a very smart student way back when. So when he was quite young, he was always a good student. The fact that he was involved in not only intellectual, but some, political activity that perhaps people didn't like or the government didn't like, which, would give anything that we do, of course, just like the Black Lives Matter movement now, okay? Depending on whose side you're on, it's either good or it's not so good. But fortunately, most people are seeing the good side of it,
Yeah.
except for people in higher up places. So Dr. Karenga he came to the forefront after the Watts riots. And so the Watts riots were in 1965. Now remember, Rochester had its own riots in 1964. So this was across the country, very much like what's going on today. It was about police brutality, and it was about watching the police. Same thing. So we're backed up, what, more than 50 years, okay, into this. So it's been a long time, and we're still fighting the same thing. So the US organization just differed a little from the Black Panther Party in that it was intellectual, and intellectual in the sense that it was formed, it was made to form a value system. And that value system, Dr. Karenga decided should be around an African value system and not what we had been taught. But that African value system is very much like what I like to call the Southern value system, the Black Southern value system, where, you don't walk into the room of adults without speaking to them, okay?
Yeah.
Where you always are respectful to your elders, okay? Where you are expected to do well. So excellence is always expected, whether you're in the kitchen, whether you're building something, whether you're going to school, therefore, like the HBCUs. So there's a lot there in terms of values that's actually an African focused value system. And so Dr. Karenga actually was creating intellectuals that knew their connection to Kemet, their connection to which of course a lot of people know as Egypt, their connection to where the original languages, some of the original languages come from in Southern Africa, also connected to a lot of the general beliefs in Western Africa. So he was quite thorough in in the way that he constructed us organization. Now, the fact, of course, that sometime in, I believe it was maybe 68, that there was some, there were some things that were created, some conflict between us and the Black Panther Party. We know now that it was counterintelligence agency under J. Edgar Hoover that, kind of made sure that there was a little rift in between. So that's a whole other story. But Dr. Karenga is one of the people who he has singularly influenced contemporary culture in America. And he has specifically influenced African American intellectual culture. So by that, and most people know him as the creator of Kwanzaa, but before Kwanzaa, the holiday was created, he created the 7 principles. And those 7 principles are used as a basis for a lot of things, whether it's Black psychology or in some classrooms. And most of us know, the 7 principles from Umoja, Kujichagulia, Ujima, Ujamaa. Nia, Kuumba, and Imani. So, and a lot of things are named after that. So we certainly know enough young sisters and maybe older sisters named Nia
Yeah.
and Imani. Okay.
Got a couple family
Um,
members with those names.
yep, which means purpose and faith. And there are a lot of organizations called Ujima, which means collective work and responsibility. So, it took some study to figure that out. It wasn't, he didn't just come, like wake up one morning and just write that down,
Yeah.
bingo. And so, but some people think that. They think that, you know. And then they get into, oh, well, he was in prison. Like everybody who was, whoever protested against anything, from Dr. King to Malcolm X, everybody went to jail. Okay, so
Yeah.
if you are an advocate of creating equality, and particularly equality for Black people, you're going to be part of a protest movement, and chances are you're going to go to jail. So,
Yeah.
that argument is not even valid as far as I'm concerned.
So what
So,
are some of the things,
you have a
um,
question?
yes, I do.
Yes.
So what are some of the things you think that the protesters of today can take from the teachings? Like, what are some of the things that
Some
they
of the
could
things
do
that
to,
protesters today take,
yeah, like what do they take and what could they take more of? Like,
what can they
what are
take
things that
more
you
of?
see? Yeah, like what are
Yeah,
things you see
they
that
can take,
you
and it's warm out here. They can take definitely where his focus was on not only like basically his grounding of culture and what culture does for you. As I said earlier, culture shows you or teaches you how to act and react. So responsibly. So that means that you don't just do or say any old thing. So
yeah,
you're always mindful of being respectful. And his focus was on asserting rational culture, but it had to be based on history and tradition. So it was always grounded in the intellectual piece.
mm,
So a lot of times we do things, but we don't have. It's because we think we ought to be doing it, or we heard we ought to be doing it, but we don't really have all of the background. And then if you don't have all the background, then you might make an error, or something could be missing from what you're doing.
yeah,
So, and I would say that one of the I was actually just on a Zoom conference about a week ago with Dr. Karenga, Dr. Santi, and some
that's
other
what's up.
scholars. Um, and one thing that Dr. Karenga said was that today we need to keep our focus. That's one of the things. And we can't allow other people and other factions to divert our focus. When we are talking about equality for all, and particularly for freedom for Black people around the world. So as you see, this movement has struck a chord with many people in other parts of the world. So in Great Britain, on the continent of Africa, wherever colonialism has taken place, it's also striking a chord with our Latino brothers and sisters who are now tearing down statues of Gandhi, you know. So we have to keep our focus. And sometimes it gets diverted. It all of a sudden goes into the women's movement, the LGBTQ plus movement, and not saying that any of those movements are not important,
Because they're very
but
much so.
when things become diluted, then
Useful.
your focus may get lost.
Yeah.
Hmm. And we have to control it. So the other
Oh, yeah.
thing he says is that we have to always control what is going on. We can't let somebody come in and co-opt it and say, well, we'll help you. And the next thing you know, other people are running it. People who don't look like us are running it.
Yeah. We don't want that. We need to make
No,
sure that our voices are heard and that
right.
what we're saying is at the forefront of our message, because what a lot of people have to say is important. And while all Black people might not think the same thing, it's those thoughts that are important, regardless of what they are. The fact that they're
Hmm.
out there in the world and that they're being heard is what is the most
Hmm.
important part. So I want to ask you what your thoughts are in this moment right now that you want to speak to not only the young people like me, but just people in general. Final message for us before we close out.
Final message. Wow, that sounded like the final message there. That was to keep your focus. Okay, keep your focus and keep on the task, because we're really, I think young people are really moving the ball where we were trying to move it more than 50 years ago.
Hmm.
And I think if you all stay determined and stay focused and use what you have, use the technology, because, I mean, we were tracking police back then, but we only had regular cameras and, so we didn't have the technology that you all have. So, but we are 100% behind you, and it feels different now. And always, always do your research, collect knowledge.
I want to thank you for
Okay?
spending your time with me for this little interview. And I want to thank everybody at home for watching along and learning a little something about Black history and the ways that we can improve ourselves and the ways that we do things. My name is Stephen Simmons with The Deadline, and I have been having the excellent pleasure to talk with Miss Terry Chaka. So you will have a good day and peace out.
Okay. Ashe. Peace. Go tap.